Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. We'll start in about a minute, just letting people come in. Hello, everyone. We'll just be starting very shortly. Okay, I think we'll get going. So hello and welcome, everyone. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands from which we all respectively meet and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. We also extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and to all Indigenous peoples across the region. I would personally like to acknowledge the people of the Kulin Nations, the traditional owners of the lands from which I'm speaking to you today. This is the third session of the 2025 ACTS and SDSN Australia, New Zealand and Pacific Regional Forum, Putting Education for the SDGs into Practice in Higher Education. I'm Tal Keston, Network Manager for the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, or SDSN, for Australia, New Zealand and Pacific, based at the Monash Sustainable Development Institute. And I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you on behalf of myself and my amazing co-host, Rhiannon Boyd, who's the CEO of ACTS. And we'd love to hear who is joining us in the audience today, so please feel free to use the chat function to introduce yourselves. SDSN and ACTS have been collaborating over several years to support the higher education sector to embed the SDGs and sustainability in strategy, curriculum and practice. And in this forum, we specifically focus on SDG 4.7, which calls for all learners to acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development, and really look at what SDG 4.7 means in practice for higher education. In the first two sessions last week, we explored some high-level concepts and approaches, including how institutions could prioritise implementing SDG 4.7 and the role of higher education in providing green skills, or whatever that means, to all their students to support the transition to a sustainable economy and society. In both of these sessions, the importance of integrating education for sustainable development across the disciplinary curriculum came out really strongly. So the topic we're going to delve into today's session is looking at practical approaches to integrating education for the SDGs into higher education degrees. In this session, we'll be hearing from experts in different disciplines and contexts on the approaches they're taking to integrate education for sustainable development and approaches into their programs. I'm really looking forward to hearing about really the realities of undertaking these complex processes and the insights that have gained, as well as learning from similarities and differences between different disciplines. I will invite each speaker to provide a 5-minute initial overview of their work, and then we'll have time to explore issues and audience questions in more detail. So to ask questions, either post in the Q&A tab or in the chat. So to get us started, I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Alan Hill, Head of Department of Humanities at the ARA Institute of Canterbury, who will talk to us about the approaches they're using at ARA to provide interdisciplinary sustainability core capabilities relevant to all degrees and professional development. So over to you, Alan.
Thanks, Tal. Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to be here. Just allow me a very short time just to introduce myself as we would here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Tēnā koutou katoa, he aru uri ahau no tāwhiti I tau okutipuna ki runga I a manawa tū kia mihi au ki taua whenua. E noho ana ki Otutahi anai nei, kia mihi au ki te mana whenua ki Ngai Tuahuriri, ko Dr. Alan Hill toku ingoa ko kai whakahaere te hoe Aranui. So just as Tal has done and many of you have done, acknowledging our Indigenous people of this area where I live in Otutahi, Christchurch, Ngai Tuahuriri, who are, as we would say, mana whenua. And just acknowledging where my ancestors landed in this nation, in the Manawatu, which is an area up in the North Island of New Zealand. Very quickly, in my role here at ADA, I want to talk about two aspects of my work. One is the work I've done over the last 6-7 years, developing and leading an interdisciplinary master's degree called a Master of Sustainable Practice. That degree inherently has a range of different students in it from a wide variety of professional backgrounds, accountants, marketing people, business people, engineers, architects, health professionals, teachers. We've had brewers. We've had a really wide range of people enter into that program. And so I've been working for quite some time with sustainability in an interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary context. I guess core to that, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the converted, we have a bit of a catchphrase that sustainability is everybody's business. I guess flowing out of the work I've been doing in that Master of Sustainable Practice, and as I've moved into leadership roles in the institution, we've looked at, I guess, sustainability core capabilities that might be applied more broadly in an interdisciplinary context across all our programs. And this is really framed around three core ideas that are divided up into what we've called six core capabilities. So the ideas are to understand, to care, and to act. So very simple, and I'm sure many of you will be familiar with these sorts of ideas. UNESCO has been promoting these, for well over 2 decades. Let me just break those down into the 6 core capabilities that we work with. In the understanding phase, there's 2 parts to this. One is the idea of understanding systems. For us here in Aotearoa New Zealand, a key part of that is understanding Indigenous knowledge systems and how they contribute to our practice of sustainability and our understanding. The second core capability is being future focused, considering the future, thinking about both mid and long term future and how present actions, impact for our future. Into the second areas of care, core capability 3 is what we define as working with values. So we propose that sustainability is inherently a values-based proposition, and it's about both personal and professional values, about understanding our values, and again we draw here quite heavily on Indigenous knowledge, Te Ao Māori, Maturanga Māori, to help inform core values. Core capability 4 is being self-aware, so quite linked to the values idea, but understanding self, understanding our own assumptions and beliefs, interrogating those, and being able to think about how those particular assumptions, beliefs, the way in which we've developed influences our thinking. Moving into the ability to act, there are 2 core capabilities. The first is collaborating with diverse others. We see the sustainability project is one that is inherently collaborative, inherently about working with others, and working across cultures and diverse perspectives. And then finally, the last core capability is around thinking critically and strategically. So that's about those sort of rigorous analysis skills, employing evidence, rational decision making, as well as being able to strategically plot your way forward. So I think that's about 5 minutes from me, Tal. I'll leave it there and potentially unpack some of those ideas a little bit further in the Q&A session. Kia ora, thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan, and definitely there'll be a lot to unpack in that and how you see that being put into practice at the ARA Institute. So next up, I'd like to invite Dr. Simon Minay, who's a lecturer in management at Murdoch Business School, who will be talking to us about transforming an entrepreneurship and innovation at Murdoch University.
Thank you very, very much for your introduction, Tal, and thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about what we do here today. Very good afternoon, very good morning to everyone here on the call. My name is Simon Minai, and it would be remiss of me not to acknowledge my colleague Vesna Sampson, who I work in partnership with and have been working in partnership with to develop the entrepreneurship and innovation major that we've been crafting, creating, developing for the last 4 years or so. So I obviously would like to acknowledge that the traditional custodians of the land upon which I'm currently based on, so the Wajak Noongar people. But 5 minutes is a very short period of time, so I'm going to have to kind of put the accelerator on. So a little bit about the major and what I've prepared and showing you here today. So entrepreneurship and innovation, it's a major that is focused primarily on solving problems and developing solutions that can benefit consumers. But we also understand that the role of business is more than simply just making money. So we very much subscribe to the understanding that our impact has to be responsible, and we need to think in terms of people and planet also. In developing the major, we began in 2021 with what I can only really describe as a bit of a blank canvas. And together, my colleague and I, Vesna, and others, we sat down and we nutted out, in essence, what we felt would be important for any student taking an entrepreneurship and innovation major. We wanted to make sure that this experience was valuable, fulfilling. It helped to develop practical skills that enabled a graduate to be able to go off and start their own business and their own organization. And so through a lot of discussion, a lot of debate, negotiation, and one or two strong words between ourselves, we were able to come up with the following components. So let me maybe just talk a little bit about this and then relate it back to the issue of sustainability, because as you can maybe see, it is something that we take very seriously here. So the major that we've developed is made up of 8 units, and it really begins with the unit in the top right corner, BUS 109, the innovator's mindset. It's about developing new products and new services, because we believe that any business, if it's going to exist, has to have something of value to offer its customers. And then we encourage students to take on board various other skills that culminate with the BUS 366 Stand and Deliver unit. So we've got business planning and business strategy. We've got project management, entrepreneurial finance, cultures of innovation. We have a relatively long list, but we have had to essentially kind of cull a few subjects along the way. So again, there was a lot of discussion and debate. But what I'd like to maybe turn or focus my kind of discussion on are the United Nations Development Goals that you can maybe see associated with each of these units. Because the major that we've developed is, in essence, one that builds around the UN Sustainability Goals. So when you study design and development, or when you study finance, because these are project-orientated units, we think it's really important that you apply that learning to in a practical manner. And so we have identified what we describe as thematic foci, in this case, United Nations Development Goals, that students work on in conjunction with their classroom learning. So if I'm doing design, for example, then I might be looking at designing solutions to meet waste challenges, for example. Or if I'm looking at leadership, for example, it might be educational leadership. But in essence, we've tried to incorporate UN development goals throughout everything that we do. It's a learning by doing process, and at the end of every project-based unit that we've created, we encourage students to teach us, the teachers, on what they've discovered, not only about their customers, but about these issues, these problems that need to be addressed. I fear I may have gone over 5 minutes. If that's the case, my apologies. I have so much to talk about, but I think as in the case of Alan, we can maybe pick other things up later on. Hopefully that makes sense, but thank you.
Thank you so much, Simon. You were just exactly on time, so thank you very much for that, and really fascinating approach. We'd love to unpack that later. Next, I'd like to invite Kate Mai, who's a senior lecturer in accounting and course coordinator for the Bachelor of Accounting at the La Trobe Business School. And she'll talk about integrating the SDGs and sustainability into the undergraduate accounting degree at La Trobe University. Over to you, Kate.
Thanks, Tal. My name is Kate, and as introduced by Tal, I manage a Bachelor of Accounting course at La Trobe Business School. So in order to talk a little bit about introduce about the approach that we use to integrate the sustainability into our course, I just have to briefly mention that accounting degree in over Australia, as most of the university in Australia are accredited by the CINCPA. And what does it mean is that we don't really has much to say in terms of what we can teach. So there has been a list of the technical skills and professional skills that required by the professional bodies. So in order to integrate the sustainability in a meaningful way into the degree, we'll have to think about how that can go around the focus on the sustainability from the professional perspective. And then we also try to integrate the UN SDGs into the curriculum as well. So if you can think about that, in the SDGs space, we will see that the high quality education focus on the knowledge and the skills that can help the students to become to think sustainably, and also can produce the solutions to support the sustainability practice. So from the knowledge field, we in accounting, we focus on ethics, the decision making. We focus on the transparency. So if you disclose more information out there, everyone have information, there's more chance that people have access to the information that can help them to make the decisions. And we focus on what type of accounting practice that help to support the sustainability. And we also focus on the type of the theories that support the sustainability, which is the stakeholders theories. And in terms of the skills, we focus on the integrated thinking, which is the backbone of sustainability, because when we can think how things are connected to each other and how our decision will influence others, then there's higher chance that we can think more about others when we make the decision. And together with that would be the ability to solve the problems in the ethical and cultural dilemmas situations. Because most of the time accounting deal with the decision making in organizations where the profit and loss and the ethical and sustainability aspect are put on the scales, and somehow we will have to convince people of the sustainable solution, but at the same time will not damage the financial aspects of organizations. So our students constantly have to struggle between how to make the organization profitable at the same time as make it sustainable. And I believe that it's very, very practical things that all of us have to deal with day by day, right? And in terms of, we'll try to put in cultural diversity awareness as well, because our cohort is mainly international students, and therefore we have a very good cohort to implement the cultural diversity awareness, which we believe that will enhance the problem solving in ethical and cultural dilemma situations. And at the same time, because they kind of speak to each other in a different accents and different background, they will have to improve their ability to communicate and influence each other, like convince. And then it helps them to team work better. And we try to train these skills through the use of teaching case studies, integrated case studies, and as well as try to group the people in multiple cultural groups. And at the same time, what we try to do is to cover some of the SDGs in our subjects. So I'm not sure how much time do I have left, but we will talk more about this when we get to the discussions. But the idea is that we will put as much of the SDG in each of the subject as possible, not to take the box, but where we find the relevant content of the subjects, then we will relate to either through the activities, learning activities, or through case studies, the way that we design the case studies so that it's bring out the problems. So that is the approach that we use in our accounting degree. So we'll talk more about that when we come to the discussion. Thanks, Tal.
Thank you very much, Kate, and what an amazing diagram as well. I'm loving that. All right, well, last but not least, I'd like to invite Professor Michele John, who's Director of Sustainable Engineering Group at Curtin University. And in addition to this role, she has recently published a handbook on global sustainability, education and thinking for the 21st century. And she'll be sharing with us some international lessons and local reflections on integrating ESD into disciplinary degrees, which will provide a really good transition to the discussion. So please, if you have any questions for the speakers or more generally, please go ahead and post them in the Q&A or the chat. But in the meantime, I'll pass on to Michele. Michele, I think you might be still on mute.
Yes, sorry. Is that better?
Now we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, apologies. I'm talking to you from Noongarland in Perth, where we've just today started the season of Geran, which is a very welcome relief after our long, hot summer here in Perth. The book also has just been published in February this year. It's been a 5-year project looking at the importance of sustainable education and development. Now, have I moved on to the second slide for you? Yes, okay. The book has a very significant focus on SDGs. There are 50 international authors, so from a European perspective in particular, there's a lot of SDG curricular development. I think since we started the Millennium SDGs in 2000 in the Millennium Start with the 8 and then moving on to the SDGs for the 17 we now have. It's another 10 years down the track, 5 years to the end of the 2030 program. I think it's important for the book, with its future focus, to have started to look at a new paradigm that's developing in and around what is sustainability. And I think this focus is one on regenerative sustainability, which I'll talk a little bit about, but certainly is covered in the book. Very importantly, the SDGs were a very transient, I guess, path for us, and understanding that we need to achieve synergy between human well-being and the maintenance of all the environmental resources and ecosystems that we sit in. And the book has a very significant focus on this. And this is a very important challenge in education, as the earlier presenters have alluded to. We've got a new development, a new understanding of values and norms that are going to prescribe the behaviour that will be expected into the future. And we've also got some very significant physical resource and environmental degradation challenges to deal with. So the SDGs have been a very important framework for us to start thinking about those impacts. From a sustainability education development, the book starts to recognise that we need to recognise that across disciplines, this is a transformative learning process. It's about giving students sustainability knowledge, sustainability values, and getting them to think about their future far more than perhaps previous generations have. It's about green skill development, and it looks at the development of a sustainability mindset and how we need all those values and action focus to help inculcate the sustainability mindset in our students. Global education in this space has been fairly slow. It's starting to speed up now, and we think this movement towards accepting a broader and a more complex definition of sustainability is also very important. The book is open access published, which is marvellous, and it's one that we developed because there are two elephants in the room. There's the need to embody this education with students, and there's a need to educate the educators also. So that's been a very big challenge, getting modern curricula influenced and adding the sustainability context is very important, but very challenging in already full curricula. The ethics, values and principles that we think are important to sustainable education is not always a natural fit for many educators who don't see their realm of professional teaching to step into the values role, the principals role, and that is a very big challenge for us. I think moving forward, regenerative sustainability could offer us a much deeper and more holistic understanding of sustainable development going forward. It's a new paradigm. It's one that recognizes that we have to look at a vast array of holistic and system-focused principles and technologies to start to move forward. Things like ecological design and planning, regenerative development, regenerative design, regenerative community development. These are all features of a world that says we can do better, where 1 and 1 will equal 3. So regenerative sustainability has this focus on also addressing historical legacies, and that's very profound given the climate change pressures that we're currently facing with the greenhouse gas emissions. So we believe that regenerative sustainability needs to be an increasing framing of how we look at sustainable development. The graph here, the figure shows us that it's a wheel of connectivity, so that the triple bottom line, John Elkington's economics, environmental, and social perspectives on sustainability, and now under sustainable development become an iterative process. So all 3 features feed into each other in order to make that wheel move. Stephen Sterling started in 2012 recognizing how do we frame sustainable development within our education, how can we anchor it, and he looked at the UK government Sustainable Development Educational Panel suggestions of values and norms, and they're common to us: interdependence, citizens and stewardship, needs and rights, diversity. The influence of sustainable change, that's 13 years ago, it's even more profound now. And very importantly, the idea of risk management, the need to look into this unknown future. The sustainability competencies that have been developed by the European Commission around the Green are also very focused on embodying sustainability values, so valuing sustainability in the curricula, supporting fairness, promoting nature education, systems thinking, critical thinking, problem solving. We've alluded to many of these already today. It's also about focusing on this future. It's futures literacy, it's adaptability and resilience, and creative and exploratory thinking. And we need to look also very importantly at students being told that there needs to be political agency, there needs to be action, that collective action, and it starts with the individual. So they're very important framing elements within education, but trying to get such a complex remit of ideas and principles, norms into the curricula is another challenge. The book as a whole is very significant. It's 1,000 pages nearly, it's 60 chapters with 50 international authors, all bringing their many years of experience to sustainability. In general, if I had to summarize from a sustainable development education perspective, it's about the need to develop holistic, multidisciplinary education, regardless of the discipline that the education's in. It's about establishing this critical connection between humans and our environment. It's about inculcation of sustainability values, certainly about pronouncing some of the important sustainability competency development issues we need to put to every discipline. It's about this sustainability mindset. How do we add all the required sustainability actions and values, attributes, skills, and knowledge so that the student starts to think sustainability as a core paradigm? Very important, it's about staff training and development in sustainability education development. The book is open access through Achilles Group Limited in London, who are a consulting company who put in the money to Taylor and Francis. It's their recognition also that we need to start fundamentally at a new premise, a new paradigm of appreciating what is sustainability. So the SDGs have given us that, and I think increasingly some of those SDGs, which have been really 20 years old in many features, we're needing to revisit and rethink as a new paradigm. And I think that's where regenerative sustainability starts to help us push that legacy further. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Michele, and thank you for getting through this very big topic in such a short time. So thanks very much. So I'm trying to even think where to start, and we actually have an audience question that was something that I've been wondering about around what, so the question is actually, can you recommend any kind of frameworks for sustainability for the institutions that you've used to kind of guide your thinking around the practical implementation of the sustainability into your initiatives? And you know, you've had particularly Simon and Kate, you've had these amazing diagrams. I'm kind of wondering, where did you start from, and did you use any resources you can recommend for others? So I'm wondering if anyone would like to start on that one. Maybe Simon?
Tal, I'll just quickly start.
Sure.
I think it's a big challenge, and there's no agreed framework globally, and I'm not sure there's one solution fits all, but I think there's an acknowledgement that we all need to start somewhere. So we need to look at the knowledge for that discipline, the thinking skills and the values that need to promote sustainability, and they should be inculcated in the curricula. And then we need to look at what focus and content do we believe that relates maybe to the specific environment in which we're living, in my context, West Australia or Australia, and to include those values, because that helps to promulgate the application and the real value of seeing that sustainable education development. I think as a whole, picking one framework, it's hard. We've just implemented a review of education, sustainable education in the West Australian School of Mines, and we've developed our own using a little bit from the SDGs, a little bit from the European Commission, and a lot of our own, looking at how we make it real and applicable for the students. But it does start at inculcating every unit and looking at how we can influence that learning in the assessments, and also what education programs we provide for the teachers that can then be upskilled at the same time.
Thank you, Michelle. Simon, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, look, well, firstly, thank you very much for the question. So my colleague and I, and indeed all of the members of the team working on developing the curriculum, we've, I guess you could say, adopted a relatively organic approach when it's come to establishing or developing project aims and project tasks in each of the separate units. So, for example, and I keep going back to design, for example, because we work collaboratively in the development of every unit, and indeed we do a lot of team teaching in this, at the beginning and indeed at the end of every delivery, we sit down and we talk about what went well, what didn't go well, but we also talk about, well, how can we uplift and how can we establish new and pressing project challenges that can really stimulate and help students to learn. So, for example, earlier this year, we were thinking about the issue of battery waste and the issue of the circular economy. And we started by acknowledging, first of all, that whilst it's an interesting and an intriguing challenge, we really don't know that much about it, my colleagues and I. So we actually went out and we reached out to members of local government. We've reached out to members of organizations responsible for recycling, and we sat down and we basically said, okay, well, can you tell us something about this, because we want to establish this as a project challenge that fits within a United Nations development goal in our project. And so it's through that collaboration that we were able to shape our projects, our assessments, and establish something that not only involved helping students go out and explore something, but they also had the opportunity to engage with businesses and with organizations who could point them in the right direction. So it wasn't a framework as such, but we have tried to kind of adopt a kind of a standard approach throughout. Ask me a simple question, I'm going to give you a 5-hour answer, so forgive me for that.
I'm not sure there are any simple questions in this topic. Did anyone else have anything they'd like to add, Kate?
For counting and for any other accredited degree, because as I say, it's not easy at all to insert one more subjects or to insert one more topics into one subject. Therefore, it is like for our degree, it is very much guidance coming from the academic standards. So before 2024, you know that 2024 is the year where we start to apply the IFRS international financial reporting standards for sustainability #1 and #2. So before that, most of the organizations just voluntarily doing the sustainability report and therefore doing sustainability practice. But since 2024, most of the big organizations now have to do it mandatory. So we will have more legitimate reasons to embed sustainability throughout our subjects. But even before that, we'll have to think about how to insert the, for instance, the ethical. We can only formally teach that in one of the subjects because we don't have space. However, the way that we design our case study always probe the ethical issue. So you don't really formally teach that as a topic, but you can always design the situations where the student encounter the issues. Or in one of the topic, for instance, investment projects, where we have to evaluate whether or not the company should invest in the project. You can design a case study in the way that it's deal with cultural issue, it deal with the equity issues, like indigenous land being cleared out for planting certain kind of trees. So in that situation, the student will have to think about that. And it also comes from the individual subject coordinator as well. So it really depends on personal perceptions of what they can do to embed the sustainability in before it being formally. So like for my subjects, I am very sustainability supported, and I know that sustainability is really about you perceive yourself as part of the system and not outside the system. So I think one point that in Michele's book is that the human and its environment. So if we perceive we are part of the networks, then we will be more careful when we do whatever things with that network. So to foster that, we need this integrated thinking. And even though integrated thinking is not a graduate capabilities at our university, we have critical thinking, but we don't have specifically integrated thinking. But the way that I design the case study to link different topics and to link different things together, foster that integrated learning. And now our school, many degrees and many subjects start to use that approach as well, because our school want to support the sustainability. So that is one of the approach. So that is not really any framework unless you have any regulations. But again, as I say, organic approach means that every one of us think about, in what way we can integrate into our subjects.
Thank you very much, Kate. And it touches on a whole lot of other issues around institutional support that are in the questions. But first, I'd actually like to turn to Alan and ask, what are you next steps, or what are you doing now around integrating your core competencies across the institution? What are your next steps? How are you getting started to do that?
Yeah, thanks, Tal. It's a good question, and it's one that, of course, is very challenging. Our polytech and vocational sector in New Zealand has been under significant change over the last 4 or 5 years, with a big national merger, which then a change of government, which kind of just disbanded that, and so we're really just starting to find our feet again as individual institutions. And if I'm really honest with you, a lot of the focus in the sector has been around financial viability over the past 4 or 5 years, and that continues to be the most primary focus. In our institution, we've done significant work on our visioning piece of work in the last 6 to 12 months, and sustainability features really prominently in our vision 2030. And so that's a public document which is, which I guess really directs us as an institution. The challenge, of course, is getting to the practical nitty-gritties when we are working through curriculum development and what that actually means. And this is a challenge I'm sure that all institutions face: is how do you Yeah, I think the biggest impact we can have in tertiary education is through our graduates. We can, as an institution, we can measure our own carbon. We can try and have lots of solar panels, and we can try and reduce waste and do all that kind of stuff. But actually, the biggest impact we have is by having graduates who can be transformative in the industries that they go into, right? So it's the teaching and learning and research, which is actually where we have the most impact. Getting there is really challenging. If I go back maybe 15 years when I was working through my PhD, which was about helping teachers to incorporate sustainability into their practice, one of my key findings was that you really need to start at the point of beliefs, values, and understanding. Sustainability is not just a bolt-on where you keep doing business as usual and you just kind of bolt it onto the side. It's inherently critical. It's inherently transformative, and that has to start at that position of beliefs, values, and understanding. And a lot of what Michele spoke about is really aligns with that. So helping our educators and the people who are developing our curriculum to, in many ways, wrestle with their own beliefs, values, and understandings about what it means to be an educator, about what our curriculum looks like, about what we want our graduates to look like. That's core. So let me give you one very practical example. Our biggest contributor to waste to landfill in this country is our construction industry. Our construction industry is wedded to using poisonous timber. So timber that's treated in order to not degrade in houses, but when you have offcuts, you can't do anything with it. The only thing that can happen with it is to go into a skip bin and go to landfill. So in our institution, we have architecture degrees, and where they're really talking about using alternative materials, alternative building methods, about more efficient building methods. We also train building apprentices. And most of our building apprentices are still working with the very timber that is going to contribute significantly to the waste. All right, so we've got the challenge is those disconnects around the skills and around that critical thinking, and I guess in some ways industry drives things, and so we can't produce a whole bunch of graduate apprentice builders who are going to go out and say, oh no, I'm not going to work with that particular type of timber. So it's about being careful to try and influence change within industry as well as within our graduates. It's very difficult because we're talking about deep-seated, long-standing practices which are inherently unsustainable, spread all through our industries. So it's probably not a very hopeful or practical example, but I guess it just highlights some of the challenges of how when we want to integrate these sorts of sustainability core capabilities across all our programs, some of the tensions that we face.
You've raised a lot of different issues, Alan, and got lots of claps. I think because we do all believe that the role of higher education is going to be really significant in our graduates are going to be going out there and shaping the world. And I see it actually flip it around, is that anyone who graduates without these sustainability skills is kind of like a lock-in of bad decisions for the next 5-10 years until they get professional development. So it's a real missed opportunity as well. So I'm wondering if anyone, the question around both accreditation and also around institutional support has come up a number of times, both in the questions and in what you've brought up. And I'm kind of wondering, maybe Simon, you'd want to comment on what motivated you to develop your degree as you did, and what kind of support did you need, I guess, both from the institution and maybe also what you're seeing the interest from the students?
Okay, look, thank you very, very much for that question. I think as far as support is concerned, my colleague and I, Vesna Sampson, we often reminisce about how we were truly fortunate to be or find ourselves in a situation where back in 2021, when we had the opportunity to work on the development of the curriculum, there really wasn't that much that existed within the school. And so we had a somewhat of a blank canvas. And I know that the temptation is often to reach out. And indeed, we did reach out as far as engaging with local businesses, with scholars, with prospective students. We did a considerable amount of homework, but because we had a blank canvas and because we were given the freedom to be able to work on this, it was quite a refreshing experience because we could build around what we thought or what we felt would be really valuable for any graduate. And indeed, you know, a lot of the time we saw our okay, I'm going to start talking in the language of business, but we saw in many ways our customers as being the customers of our graduates. So ultimately, our success would be measured on how satisfied the customers of our graduates would ultimately be. And from that point, we were able to select what we thought was valuable and what wasn't. But we felt that there was really something missing in this whole experience because whilst it seemed to build on, or what we hoped each part of the curriculum built on one another, and we ensured there wasn't any overlap, there wasn't any fat, there wasn't any wastage, we thought. We needed something to kind of pull it all together and give it a character. And we felt that by having a thematic focus in each of these stages, not only would you be discovering more about a particular business subject, which, let's face it, I think a lot of people aren't going to make movies about this kind of stuff. Project management is never going to be a Hollywood blockbuster. But if we could perhaps incorporate some sustainability principles in guiding study in each of these areas, that could make for, I guess, it almost doubled the educational experience, the output for students. So not only were we learning about entrepreneurial finance, but we were also learning about maybe issues relating to pollution in the water, or maybe managing water more effectively. The reason that we were able to bring this together is that old kind of Yorkshire saying, where there's muck, there's brass. And our reasoning was that if there is a sustainability challenge, a sustainability problem, then perhaps through, and I'm going to use this word viability, if we could develop a viable, quote unquote, business solution around that, that could be the basis for bringing together a positive impact. And so it was through that we incorporated each of these elements, or brought these elements together. Student feedback so far has been really very encouraging, and we've seen a lot of people, particularly alumni, coming back saying thank you for the experience because it really helped me to discover some really important issues that had not been touched upon so far, had not been touched upon in other parts of their degree. And I think it's our responsibility to provide an avenue in which these really important subjects can be explored. So does that help answer the question?
Thank you. Yes, and a very intensive process that you went through. Michele, your book is international, and I'm really curious whether you have any insights from the process around how we compare in our region here to what is happening elsewhere in the world. Are we ahead? Are we behind? Are we on track? What's your feeling?
Well, two things, Tal. I think Europe still leads very much in this space, particularly in terms of SDG focused education, and I think that's probably going to continue. When I was halfway through the early stages of the book, COVID happened, and the publisher said that we were going to have a 18-month delay minimum as a result. And I then set out to answer 3 chapters that I couldn't get any academics for when in my run-up to the book, and that was to look at sustainability education development in China, India, and Indonesia as a Southeast Asian example. And when I did it, we had the 18 months to write it. I co-authored in order to work with academics to get the material done. But I'd already started to frame my perspective as editor on a summary of the book. These were sort of 3 last-minute chapters. And when they came in, just as we were starting to format the book for publication, I read their conclusions. And then I was looking at my editorial notes. And here was 3 developing countries exhibiting many of the editorial sort of pronouncements, I guess, I was having in terms of we needed to make sustainability education mandatory. We needed to have a significant focus on educating the teachers and having programs that upskill them, both in pre-service teaching as well as those academics already practicing and teaching in the classroom now. And that we needed to have some sort of accreditation body or framework for ensuring the quality of sustainability education, and that it needed government involvement. All 3 areas there were driven by national government involvement in the sustainability education agenda, which was phenomenal. And then I was matching these 3 conclusions with what I'd written, summing up sort of 60 chapters, and it was an epiphany for me. So I think we've looked to Europe, but I think Asia Pacific in particular, given their population pressures perhaps, and maybe culturally, they certainly seem to have an understanding of where we should be focusing on, and on this important juxtaposition between human production and consumption and the environment.
Fascinating. And I've definitely seen in terms of acceptability and use of the SDGs and these kinds of frameworks, there's a much greater uptake there. So, and I'll also be remiss, the question around educating or upskilling educators has come up a lot, and remiss of me not to mention that we actually, the final session of this forum will focus on approaches and programs institutions are using to upskill educators. But I'm wondering if anyone would like to maybe share anything about how they've brought their colleagues and others on board to help with the process of integrating sustainability. So particularly people, either your colleagues or your staff who are involved in the degree or the programs. Is anyone interested in jumping in?
I'd say 2 things to that, Tal. One, sustainability champions seem to be the catalyst for most of the education development in sustainability that we've seen globally. And they tend to be individuals who have sustainability values and ethos as part of their character, and therefore they want to see that, you know, extended in the classroom. And I think there have been many surprising points for me too along the way, where academics who I've worked for, when it came to influencing their curricula, and certainly if they've been involved in a program with us in terms of inculcating more sustainability, all of a sudden there's kickback. You're not telling me what to teach or how to teach, and I think you're overstepping the mark. And you sort of look and think, are you reading the papers? Are you following the media? Do you understand the global pressures, environmental pressures, the extrapolation of population growth? What's that going to do on our resource levels? Climate change pressures going forward. It's a very, you know, the planetary boundaries, the Rockstrom work, the limits to growth modelling. For those informed, I guess it's a natural understanding, but for many still, particularly those maybe involved in a very tight discipline where they think that tightness is all they need to really share, that's another challenge. And so there's a cultural understanding here too, that there are many academics who don't want to play the ball. And therefore, from my end, the mandatory perspective, getting the faculty involved, probably not the university, because that would be a very slow beast to sort of bring to the party, but certainly getting faculty and schools involved and getting those champions corralled so that you can help to have some influence on the speed of uptake. Because we can't go through a natural evolution of, you know, decades of engagement till we see the right levels of sustainability education being taught. This is now, and we're going to miss the boat unless we start. We're already at 2 degrees. in the Kyoto Protocol, we were talking about preventing 1.5. So the world's changing, and the feed of environmental impact change is considerable, and therefore the pressures on us as educators to develop sustainable education and empower this next generation for both mitigating as well as adapting to the changes we're going to see is crucial.
Oh, thank you, Michele. And I think it resonated with a lot of people. Kate, quick.
I think we also come from the demand for the life skills and the employability skills. So for us, like at La Trobe, we very focused on the employability skills, and with the current many agendas around the sustainability, that employers really need the students who graduate with the ability to think differently, because they accounting students normally think about how to reduce cost and how to increase profit, but now they still want to increase profit, but they want alternative solutions. How do they still maintain their profit at the same time they can they can enhance the sustainability practice as well. So we in the race, basically in the education now, in accounting in particular, we in the race of thinking how do we equip our students with carbon accounting, sustainability management accounting, doing sustainability report. So yeah, so this is really, and we just talk to our colleagues. If we don't do it, and other people are going to do it, and then we're going to lose our job. That's all.
Simon and Alan, I'm going to give you 1 minute each to maybe either respond to this or say any one last thought for the audience, because we're going to have to wrap up very soon. These sessions have been like flying by. So Simon,
sure.
Quick final comment.
Thank you very, very much. Look, I've noticed that in the chat, Professor Martin Bruckner, the Pro Vice Chancellor for Sustainability here at Murdoch, is with us, and I understand contributed to an earlier presentation. We're very fortunate at Murdoch University to have strong leadership and strong commitments towards the principles of sustainability, amongst other very important principles. And so I think that we have seen a marked uptick in interest and involvement in initiatives in this area. So I couldn't begin to talk about all of the initiatives taking place, but suffice to say, it's gratifying to note that it's people are starting to wake up to the importance and value of working in this direction.
Alan, any last thought or comment you'd like to leave everyone with?
Look, just thank you for being part of this. It's been a joy and it's been stimulating. Michele, your comments just earlier reminded me of one of my favorite authors, David Orr, and a book that he published almost 25 years ago now, Earth and Mind. And in the opening chapters of that book, he talks about many of the sustainability issues facing the planet and facing people. And he went on to say that these were not the work of ignorant people, rather they were the work of people with BAs, BScs, LLBs, and PhDs. Essentially saying that education is not a promise of a better future and a more sustainable future. He would say it's the right type of education that leads to a more sustainable future. Look, I think in higher education we've made some amazing advances. And in the vocational education sector, but I think there is a long, long way to go. I think on the whole, we're probably still contributing more to the very issues that our planet and that our societies face than we are providing solutions to a better future. So I think that critical reflection at institutional level is crucially important for us. Where are we going, and how are we moving forward, and what impact are our graduates having on the world? It's absolutely crucial for us.
Thank you, Alan. And I guess with this forum and other work that we've done together with ACTS, we really are trying to keep the momentum and conversation around this happening regionally. And I am seeing a lot of changes, even from when a few years ago, but we'd definitely like to see a lot more happening. So I'm really sorry. We're going to have to wrap up. I'd like to say a huge thank you to our speakers for both sharing these really inspirational example, and giving us a lot of, I think, hope, despite what Alan says, but a lot of things to really work with and practical insights. Please join us for the last session on Thursday. And thank you all for the fantastic questions and for joining us today. So thank you very much.